Chapter 41. Spread the Violence. During the summer, I spent most of my days drunk, high, or both. I would party until I fell asleep, and I slept all over, in hallways, in cars, on rooftops, and in abandoned buildings, anywhere I could lay my head. I began meeting a lot of the kings who ran the gang's citywide operations. They liked me because of my violent nature. It was then that I realized the wars between gangs were not about colors or revenge, but about drug turf. The Latin Kings was just not a street gang run by local thugs. They were a drug empire run by adults who were rarely seen. These people were getting richer while kids were being shot on the street corners thinking they were fighting for some honorable cause. For the small amount of time I hung out with the head honchos, I earned the privilege of going to fewer meetings. I also earned the privilege of being a king wherever I stood, not just from Cadetsy and Armitage. I was no longer regarded as a king from one territory, and no section leader had control over me. I only took orders directly from the penitentiary leaders or their generals. I gained more respect from fellow members and gained status within the gang. That little experience didn't last for long. I was too hot with the police, and that made the leaders uncomfortable. The head honchos stopped coming around to see me. In no time at all, I was back to being a street soldier fighting, so some assholes who didn't even care about me could live well. I started hanging around Cadetsy and Armitage again and returned to hardcore gangbanging. I did, however, keep the respect and rank I had gained from hanging out with the leaders. I was thrust into a position of decision-making and power. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware of this and therefore didn't take full advantage of the situation. I could have asserted myself as a committee member of the Latin Kings if I wanted to, but didn't. I was satisfied being a popular foot soldier. On the 4th of July, some King brothers got together to drive up to the Wisconsin Dells for the holiday. There were 4 carloads of us. All of us were getting high along the way, and some of us, including myself, were packing pistols. We got up there and started partying and having a good time. We had food and drinks and laid out our blankets to relax while we waited for the fireworks display. Some of the brothers went walking around checking out the scene and looking for girls. They came running back saying they were being chased by cobras. In no time at all, there was a confrontation. A shootout broke out between the two gangs. Those who didn't have guns ran for the cars. Those of us who did continued shooting into a crowd of innocent, unsuspecting people. We ran for the cars and took off back to Chicago. Only 2 carloads made it back to the hood. The others were stopped by police before they could get out of the Dells. Stray bullets hit several bystanders, but only 1 gang member got hit. That incident did not do anything to help the Puerto Ricans' reputation as savages. Within 15 minutes of arriving at Cadetsy and Armitage, a carload of gangsters drove by and opened fire on us. Ace got hit twice in the leg. His girlfriend got hit in the abdomen and died on the way to the hospital. This was the spark needed to make the summer a bloody one. The following weekend, a hit was made on the gangsters at Fullerton and Kimball Avenues, 1 dead and 1 crippled for life. It didn't take long for the gangsters to strike back. That same night, they made a hit on the Kings at Beach and Spalding Streets, but no one was shot. 2 nights later, they were at it again. On the northwest corner of North Avenue and Kimball was a restaurant called Donald Duck's Red Hots, known as Ducks, an all-night hamburger joint. At about 10:30 p.m., I was there eating and playing arcade machines with some other King brothers. A car stopped at the corner, and one of the Kings recognized the occupants as gangsters. He went outside and threw a bottle at the car, shattering the rear windshield. He came back in laughing. We all joined him. Everybody relaxed and returned to what they were doing except for me. I had been on the street for too long not to expect some kind of retaliation. Most of the guys in the restaurant with me were seasoned gang members and should have known better. They're punks, we're kings, they said when I told them we should be on alert. I knew the gangsters would come back. I walked in and out of the restaurant 3 times and saw nothing. I became relaxed also, relaxed but aware. Someone yelled gangsters and gunshots shattered the restaurant window directly behind us. Everybody hit the floor. I touched my body to see if I had been hit. Other than a few scratches from flying glass, I was okay. It was a miracle none of us got shot. I got up and ran before the police arrived. In the weeks that followed, by order of the leaders in prison, the gangs in Chicago formed themselves into 2 organizations, the Peoples and the Folks. Peoples and Folks are just like the Crips and Bloods of Los Angeles, a group of gangs united to help each other kill off another group of gangs. The peoples were Latin kings, vice lords, gay lords, and all kings affiliated with them. They wore hats tilted to the left and crossed their arms with the right on top of the left as a representation. The folks were disciples, cobras, and their affiliates. They represented the same way, only in the opposite direction. A show of colors on clothing also became very popular. Kids as well as adults were being shot at, beaten up, and harassed in any way possible just because of the clothes they wore. The style of clothes didn't matter, it was the colors that counted. The unification of the gangs that made up the peoples and the folks was really surprising. Gangs who had been rivals since the very beginning were now united in their hatred for the opposing alliance. In a way, that unification was a sign that gangs could in theory let bygones be bygones and stop the killing altogether. The gangs continued to grow. New sections were being formed in the surrounding suburbs. Suburban kids driving new cars and spending lots of money on gang activity became common. Some of them even started their own sections around where they lived. It was then and only then that the gang problem got a lot of continuous media and political attention. It took the gangs spreading into the suburbs for people to realize that something had to be done. But it was too late. Gangbanging had become some sort of rite of passage. So-called well-bred, well-raised girls thought it was the coolest thing to have a gangbanger for a boyfriend. The expectation of living dangerously was a turn-on to them. I started dating a suburbanite from Elgin. Her name was Stephanie, and she was the first white girl I dated. In fact, Stephanie and her friends were the first suburban white people I had any kind of friendly relationship with. Stephanie had beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, and a great body. She was a spoiled little rich girl with a brand new car and a purse full of credit cards. We became sexually active the first day we met. "I love Puerto Ricans," she would say. "You guys are so passionate and brave." Her parents were either never home or thought she was sleeping at a friend's house. She would take us to party at her house while her parents were away. We had sex in their bed many times. She would pull out her parents' sex toys and X-rated movies and make fun of them. "If my mother had married a Puerto Rican, she would need one of these," Stephanie said, holding up a dildo. "Look what it says on the package. Marital AIDS, my ass," she continued. "They're fucking dildos." We had some wild parties at Stephanie's with wall-to-wall sex and drugs. Stephanie thought it was so cool to wake up at the King's Clubhouse on the floor with a dozen or so other people. She tried so hard to be part of the gang. She didn't have to do this. She chose to do it. She got a tattoo of a crown with my name and a ribbon on her buttock, and she supplied me with money for drugs. Stephanie thought gangbanging was all fun and games. She hadn't actually been involved in any kind of gang activity. She was a party girl and nothing else. We were driving on the lakefront one night with her friend and a king brother named Pepe. Pepe saw a carload of guys in the lane next to us and represented the king sign. The guys in the other car pulled out guns and began shooting at us. Stephanie's friend was shot in the shoulder, and my face was cut by flying glass. Pepe and Stephanie were unscratched. We directed Stephanie to the nearest hospital, and once there, Pepe and I split. Several days later, I went to her house. As always, her parents weren't home. "Why haven't you been to the hood?" I asked. "We almost got killed, that's why," Stephanie answered. "Oh, girl, that ain't nothing," I told her. "For you it's not," she said. "But my friend almost died." I asked her if she was still going to be my girlfriend. "Of course, you silly," she answered. "I love you." Stephanie grabbed my hand and led me to her parents' room. She put on an X-rated movie and invited me to do everything we saw on screen. We didn't even watch the movie, but we sure had a good time. That was the last day I saw Stephanie. Chapter 42, Enemies Near. Back in the hood, the brothers were getting together to make a hit on the Cobras. The Cobras had started a new section on Cortlandt Street and California Avenue. That's where the hit was going to take place. After some deliberation, it was decided that only 4 brothers should go. I was one of them. I went to Locas, picked up my .357 Magnum, and got myself nice and high. California is only 4 blocks away from Humboldt Boulevard, so I decided to walk. Because of the increased gang activity in the area, the police were stopping any car they saw too many guys in it. Walking was safer. A newly initiated king brother named Gano and I walked on East Cortlandt toward California. Gano was an older brother. He was about 22 and a lifelong gangbanger. Gano was an ex-disciple and the brother of one of the main heads of the Latin Kings. Gano was one of those guys who jumped from gang to gang, depending on what neighborhood he lived in. He was tall and muscular with light brown hair and many tattoos. He had just gotten out of prison. He had been in the same penitentiary his brother was in. Because of that, he had all his disciple tattoos covered with king tattoos. Gano was, however, a cool person to hang out with. He was totally loyal to whatever gang he happened to be representing at the time. I had given Gano the 357. He was to be the trigger man. It was his first hit as a king. I was to attract the Cobra's attention while Gano played target practice. Two other brothers were going to drive by just in case we needed to hop in a car. Somehow the Cobras found out we were coming. We were by Yates Elementary School just across Richmond Street when all hell broke loose. The Cobras opened fire on us. We didn't know where the shooting was coming from. Gano returned fire wildly, not knowing where to aim. We got close to the parked cars and retreated in a hurry. The Cobras continued the onslaught. I felt a pain in my arm, fell to the pavement, and hit my head. Gano helped me up and we continued running. At that time, the brothers came by in the car, shooting as they drove through. That gave us enough time to get across Humboldt to safety. I had been shot in my left forearm and the bullet gone right through. Apparently, the brothers in the car had hit a Cobra because there were police in an ambulance by Yates School. Loca drove me to the hospital where I was treated and put in a room to wait for the police. When they left me alone, I sneaked out. The police would have asked me how I had been shot, or they might have charged me with the shooting of the Cobra. While I was in the hospital, the police had come to the hood and arrested anyone they saw on that street that even resembled a gang member. I got to Loca's and stayed there all night. Since I had left the hospital before the doctor could give me a prescription for pain, I had to drink and smoke weed constantly to relieve the pain in my arm. Loca did her best cleaning and dressing my wound. Still, I got one ugly infection. It took about 5 months for the wound to heal. I was lucky I didn't lose my arm. The only good thing that came from my wound was that it kept me from doing any serious gangbanging. I stayed around the neighborhood getting high all summer, and by winter, I was hungry for some action. During that summer, I learned how to drive a car, and Daffy, my old burglary partner, was released from the county jail. He was in on possession of cocaine and unauthorized use of a weapon. He was released on 2 years probation. Daffy and I went back into burglary and also got into armed robbery. Gano joined us. The robberies were so easy and profitable that we made them our money-making crime of choice. We stopped doing burglaries altogether. Gano thought up a robbery scheme that was foolproof. We could get a couple of queens to dress up very sexy and then drop them off at a bar. The queens would find the man with the most money and try to pick him up. They would usually target Mexicans who didn't speak any English. Usually these turned out to be illegal aliens who were reluctant to call the police. With promises of sex, a queen could easily get a man to leave with her. She would walk him to a dark place where we would be waiting to stick him up. To make sure we weren't followed after the stick up, we made it a habit to take our victims' pants with us. Daffy got greedy and began doing this twice, sometimes 3 times a night with different queens. Gano and I would only go on party nights, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Daffy got caught. This time he got sentenced to 3 years in prison. Not bad for armed robbery and violation of probation. Gano and I continued doing armed robberies and became really tight. I had Pee Wee King selling weed for me. They practically volunteered to do so. Loca would collect the money and give them more supplies when I wasn't around. Loco and Lalo rarely came around anymore. When they did, they were the subject of the other king's admiration. They had big, beautiful cars and gorgeous females. They wore expensive clothes and lots of jewelry. Apparently, they too were now living off the blood and sweat of the brothers who walked the streets. I didn't like being a king anymore, especially a foot soldier. I detested it, but I was too scared to say so.